And I love your conversation, and we won't be able to finish it today, but at least tell us who you are, what's your highest level of education, about your family, about how come you became so smart in spite of your new arrival. It's not new, but it's not like you're born here.
At the beginning was supposed to be 2 years to do my master's in communications at TSU, but then I met my husband. So I met my husband in our grad program, and we got married a few years later. And of course, we decided to stay here for a few years longer. I had a son, and his name is Teddy. He's 12 now, but my son was also born very prematurely. So we spent quite a bit of time in the hospital, and that also pushed us to stay here with my husband's family. So I decided to make Cleveland my home. Most of what I've done in the US has been around workforce development, talent management, education, all within the space of what we call underrepresented groups, with a particular emphasis, obviously, and interest in the Latino community. So I did some work in nonprofit, in higher education, in corporate environment, and then in 2018, I decided that it was time for me to go and do my own thing. So I started AmMore Consulting and the 100 Plus Latinos Cleveland Must Know, really out of a very personal need, first for autonomy and some flexibility to be with my son that at that time was like 6. The workplace environment here in the US, no matter how many people claim that it's family friendly, or perhaps nobody does, it's not, right? So I had a young son, I had a young family, I wanted to be with them. I didn't want to outsource everything with my son just to be at work. So I decided to go be on my own, create my own company. And the other need was really the need for creating spaces that were more understanding and inclusive for someone like me, an immigrant, highly educated, from Latin America, that want to make a contribution, that wanted to be in the workplace, but sometimes, there were some fitting issues, right? Some cultural differences that were hard for me to adjust to understand, to follow. So I created AmMore Consulting with the mission of helping organizations to become what I call Latino-Ready. Ready to be more inclusive for Latino talent, for the Latino community. So the idea is that I help with the strategic planning or strategic consulting to companies that want to be better equipped to attract, retain, promote, advance Latino talent to succeed and thrive. And the other side of the equation is the Latinos, because I want to help the companies, but I also want to help the Latino professionals in this region to be more visible, to show that we're here. I always tell this story. When I came to Cleveland, the first thing they would say, oh, well, you're from Chile. We really want to hire more Latinos, or we really want to, go to businesses that are Latinos, but we can't find them. There's nobody here. There's no talent that is either educated or speaks English or whatever the excuse, in my opinion, was. I was tired of that excuse. And the 100 Plus Latinos was a response to that. Like, we are here. We're just not visible for you because you don't make an effort. I'm going to make it very easy for you to find us. I'm going to, recruit 100 people every year, so you will have no more excuses, because we are here. We're making contributions. We want to be leaders. We want to be engaged, but we need spaces, right? And that's what the 100 Plus Latinos is all about. So with those two sides of the coin, I feel like I make my contribution, and I leave a legacy too, right? To the newer generations, like my son, right? Half Chilean, half US.
Great. So what's the name of the company? And one thing that always intrigued me is, first is Latino, then is Hispanics, then is Portuguese, which is Brazil. So what's it? Because there was a time Chinese Americans, we don't know that, most of us don't know that Brazil, they don't speak Spanish.
Yes.
And then the Brazilians say,
and then the Brazilians are
like,
oh, no.
I only speak Portuguese.
Yes.
I don't speak Spanish. Or
Excuse
I'm not,
me, but
that's
I don't.
Right, that's
yes.
right. It's just like the old Persian language, the Irans. I'm not Iranian, I'm a Persian,
Yes.
So how do you distinguish? And also from Chile, Chileans are known to be more and maybe I'm getting into bad territory because I'm only Asian. The Chileans are known to be Argentina. They're known to be more, maybe educated. They also are richer than most of the southern. But looking back, Mexico is really also
Yes.
rich, but there's more corruption or whatever. So how do you distinguish Latino, Hispanic, the islands? How do you describe your Chilean? So how do you
Well,
separate that?
we could have a whole podcast and session about this. So I'm going to try to, make it as simple as I do in some of my workshops. First, to your question about the name. So AmMore Consulting is the name of my company. And it's a combination of Amschlinger, which is my husband's last name, German last name, and Moreno. So that's how it came about to be AmMore. But the trick is that I also wanted it to mean something. So for some people, it means amor, like love, which I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was I am more. So it was more about I am more, just feeling this sense of empowerment and self-confidence around the things that I was going to do. I was very scared when I started my company. I didn't know what I was doing. So I guess that gave me a little bit of, my own sense of self-esteem to start feeling that I am more, that I can do more, especially for my community. Mm-hmm. Going back to the question about the terms, really, because what we're talking about is just more the words, right? So the one thing I always tell people to not forget is that the term Latino, Hispanic, now Latinx or Latine, was created in the US in an effort to unify us, to really start understanding our issues. And actually, the first term was Hispanic. Right? So in the early 1970s, some, social service organizations were really trying to make a case. We have disparities. We don't have funding. The only way to do that was to create a category in the census that will speak and will be able to track how many people we were, right? And that's how the term Hispanic came to be like part of the lexicon of the United States, right? And that was in the census of 1970. Over the past, decades, obviously the words have changed, the cultures have changed, and preferences have changed. People have changed. We're more globalized now. And there was other terms that were incorporated, right? Latino, to speak about, more broadly about people that come from Latin America or have a heritage of Latin America. Because Hispanic is mostly about language and the influence of Spain, right, into the Latin American countries, right? But then we left out Brazilians because they were not colonized by Spanish, they were colonized by Portugal, and they spoke, Portuguese, right? So then the term started to kind of shape, and then now newer generations wanted to make it more gender inclusive. So Spanish and Portuguese is gender language, so everything is either female or male. So with the upcoming of the new terms and the new ideologies around inclusion for non-gender binary people, there was the Latinx, the X at the end, because you're not either a woman or a man or female or male. And then that word Latinx in Spanish-speaking countries is Latine with an E at the end, because the E, includes everyone, right? So it's a little bit of trend, it's a little bit of history, it's a little bit of bureaucracy. At the end, I personally don't care about how they call us as long as they care about us and they are strategic. But it's going to depend on each person what they prefer. There isn't a right or a wrong term. It's going to be very personal because remember, this is an ethnicity. It's not what we call a race. So you can really self-identify.
I was not thinking.
Yeah, we can self-identify, right? The last piece before we move into that is that also all the research that is done, particularly by the Pew Research, really speaks about the fact that most Latinos or Hispanics individuals tend to prefer to self-identify by their countries of origin. So first and foremost, I'm Chilena. Then I'm Latina because I'm in the US. But honestly, nobody in Chile calls themselves, I'm a Latina. No, I'm a Chilena. I'm a Chilean, right? So, and that really plays into pretty much every Latin American country. So, there's no right or wrong. I think I had always advised my clients to come to it with a curiosity mentality. Like, what tell me about yourself, right? Where are you from? Versus, well, are you Latina or are you Hispanic, or what term is going to be right or wrong? Because there isn't a right answer or wrong, right? There are certain preferences, but not quite a right. Nobody can say that there's a right or wrong way. It's going to be mostly personal preference.
Good. So another question I have, which I found very interesting, because years ago when I first started practice, I've been doing for 50 years. Years ago, people like us, we don't do Hispanic or Latino cases. We don't speak the language, and it's just so foreign because most of them, they want to go home. They come, they work 10, 20 years, they buy a farm, they go home. Especially from Central, in those days, Central Americans are not even here because of the Dirty War, and then Mexicans came. And then in the 90s, the Central American came, or the 80s. So through the years, how does someone who came in the 60s or 50s view people like us who came in the maybe 80s and 90s? Do they, like in Chinese, we have a big problem, we call them lemon on egg. White outside, yellow inside, and then the American-born kids with people like us who came so long ago, because we are also struggling between who am I? Am I really Chinese, or, but I'm from Hong Kong. Am I British or Chinese or a subject, or, and now Hong Kong went. So how does the Hispanic Latino people think about all these new generation, or do they even care about it?
That's an excellent question. And to be honest with you, I think we're just starting to talk about it. The fact that we have new terms, the fact that we are now feeling more being a more powerful voice. I was just gonna say that now that we're seen finally as a group of voters, we have big purchasing power. We're getting educated. We're finally starting to have a voice, and we're finally starting to feel empowered to speak up. So I'm not sure if even, I don't know if it happens in the Asian community, but perhaps 2 generations ago for us, even 1 generation ago, you weren't even expected or encouraged to speak Spanish.
That's right.
Because you wanted to assimilate. So I have a lot of friends that they did not. That's right. They did not learn to speak Spanish because their teachers didn't want them. They punished them physically, and their parents didn't want them to have an accent, right? Because at that time it was thought.
You guys are white anyway. It's not even like us. We have skin.
Well, but that's also in a way a misconception, right? Because not everyone in the Latino community is white. We can be of any race. We have blacks, we have indigenous, we have a big influence of European countries, and we're mixed. So
under the law, everybody in South America and Mexico is white under the Color Quota Act of 1965. Civil Rights Act came in 64.
Well, but the law and how people self-identify, and then in the census even, like we've always had an issue, like all the racial categories. I'm like, I'm other, because I don't see myself as a white person. I definitely don't feel like I have the privilege.
Law, Latino, like a set-aside programs.
Okay.
Sometimes they have to put it out and say, except Hispanic, Latino, or from Mexico or something. But as far as we are concerned, the colored people, we see you guys as white. Like, I would never think of you as Latino. I mean, even
really?
So
see,
weird.
This is so interesting too about perception, because perception is reality, right? And how you see and where you are in the spectrum.
That's right.
Right?
Because now with our translators, I still think they're white, and that's what they remind me. I'm not white. I say, but you are. You look white, you know. But even the African American, I mean, now you say the black people, the indigenous. I still, you're right. I don't know what I'm thinking.
Well, and it's interesting because I always.
Thinking,
So this is a funny kind of story with my husband. So every time with my husband family, sometimes, okay, so what color is my hair? And I say it's brown. And my husband and my mother-in-law would say, no, it's black. No, it's not black. It's brown.
That's right.
So because everybody sees it within their own lens, right? It's kind of like an example of, so if you're blonde, my hair looks really dark, right? So degrees of, the darker are a lot less than for me, because like, oh, no, I don't have black hair. She has black hair. And it's like a difference, right? But it's kind of how you perceive,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
And where you're sitting for that perception.
Right.
So,
So I love your comments. So then another question I have is, for example, we have clients from Venezuela, from Chile, and then people say, "Oh, be careful of the Venezuelans because they're going to New York. They're creating a lot of havoc." So as a Chilean, how do you answer that question? Oh, Venezuelan immigrants are not good, or oh, they have, and the Cubans, they have wonderful medical care, so they're all good doctors. There's always one bad one somewhere, somehow, But how do you answer to that question? See, I feel empowered when I deal with the Asian community because I'm like an auntie. I'm 74 years old. I say whatever, and people respect me. But as a new person who wants to understand, who's curious about the life, what would you tell our listeners and our audience and people like us?
to really stop and face and accept that you have biases and that the comment is a stereotype. I think education and awareness and also being curious about others is what perhaps we don't have currently without trying to go into too much politics. But there's in a way like a lack of curiosity and a fear of the other. And some of those comments, sometimes I say, okay, well, give me the data, or, tell me more about that. What makes you say that? Well, because I know, because usually they are personal experiences that you have had with one person, right? They are not data that, can be really generalized. And even if you can generalize, Margaret, everybody's it's an individual, right? And I always tell this to my clients too. When I do work with talking about the Latino community, I'm not speaking about every single Latino person, because we're all very unique and we're different, and we're going to have different experiences and different ways of living, and some are highly educated, some are criminals, like in every group, right? We're not exceptional from that perspective. But I think that having the curiosity to dig a little deeper, and also having the curiosity and also being empowered to speak up. I think I try to stop people when they make some of those comments, and I say, okay, well, I disagree with you. Tell me what makes you say that, or I would invite you to perhaps know other Latinos, or read some books or look at these resources, so you can at least have a more informed, complex view, because not everyone in this group is going to be this type. So I try to come at it from that perspective. Now, sometimes it's easier said than done, right? You're trying to change people's perceptions or people's cultures and upbringings, right? That sometimes they haven't had access or exposure to people from other countries.
Another question I really have, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, especially after yesterday, because I'm preparing for this meeting. I always wonder, what made you start aside from 2018, you want to spend time, because in the Chinese community, we have pure staffing groups, because most Chinese that works in kitchens, that works in waiters, for Chinese restaurants, they don't speak English. So we have recruiting companies who specialize in getting you drivers or getting you babysitters who needs Chinese. We also have, but we really don't have, as far as I know, I've lived here in this country for more than 50, 60 years. I think you are one of the first companies I know of that actually have a consulting vision. Instead of saying, give me 10 Latino or Chinese people working, or I need to hire a babysitter for my wife and my 3 children who speaks Chinese, you have that vision to say, tell me what's your culture of a company. Tell me what your company wants to establish. Are you looking for growth? Are you looking for diversity? Are you doing it for your personal ambition just to mix the cultures? And I think you're the only, I haven't heard of any business, or at least I was never pitched, by some business who say, but tell me, why do you want to recruit more Chinese? Why do you want to recruit more Latinos? What's your vision? And how can I help you to go? Because you and I had an earlier talk, and I was very surprised at what made you come up with that idea. That's a very creative, I think,
No, thank
thought.
you.
And you also help them understand, execute the plan. You're not just
Yes.
giving them a roadmap like the big consultant, McKinsey and stuff, all those big, they just give them a plan and say, you have to hire your own people to execute my plan.
Yep.
You did it for them.
Yep. Well, and I forgot to mention something that has been really at the core of my business as of now too. I mean, I look to grow, but I'm very regional and I am committed to this region. So a lot of people ask me, do you want to grow or you want to go to other parts of the country? And yeah, perhaps in the future, but at the core of why I started AmMore was because I wanted to make this region more inclusive for Latino talent, because I felt like we needed it the most, right? We don't have a big population of Latinos, but we're the only group growing. So if you're not getting ready to attract, recruit, and retain talent, you will not have a workforce.
That's
It's
right.
as simple as that. So to me, it was almost like, what are these companies doing that are not thinking about how to attract me? Like, you should be thinking about all of the Latinos that you're encountering in how to persuade them and have a good culture that they want to be part of. And I struggle with the recruiting model. Everybody asks me if I'm a recruiter. I think it's an important part in the equation, but I don't believe that recruitment works if the company does not understand what it means to be inclusive for different talents. So
Right.
to give you a very quick, concrete example. So I do a lot of training in cultural competence, and I teach people the difference between the Latino culture in general, right, and the U.S. corporate culture. So when we're thinking about performance reviews, right, or even interviews, job interviews. So one key element in the U.S. corporate culture is that you have to look at people directly in the eyes. Well, for the Latino culture in general,
To
Latinos
respect
don't,
that's
correct.
right.
So
Chinese, we have the same problem.
we don't look at people in the eyes
Right,
because
right.
that's a sign of disrespect.
Right.
However, when you look at it from the perspective of the U.S. culture,
Same with people
they
like us,
think
yeah.
that you're hiding something,
Right,
right? So
right.
the recruiter, if the person is not aware that that's different, what are they going to tell the hiring
I'm
manager?
so glad you say
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
oh, I don't like this person. She didn't
Right.
look at me in the eye. I think she's hiding something.
shake my
She didn't
hand.
shake my hand. She's
Yeah.
too shy. No,
Yeah.
she's not, she's not ready for this position. That's not quite true.
Because we don't say things unless we really mean it. But in the Western culture, you're supposed to say, I can do this, I can. And I tell my
Correct.
friends, don't be quiet, just
We
say
don't
yes.
talk about our
That's right,
accomplishments.
that's
We're
right.
not taught to be.
No, we want to be the same on the round table. But
Correct.
on
We
the other,
tend
those
to
are my
be
bosses, Yeah.
Asians too, more
Yeah.
in the collectivistic kind of
That's
mindset,
right.
right? Versus the US
I'm
that
so
is
glad you brought
highly,
it up.
individualistic. So to me, there was a missing kind of link in all of this. Data also shows that Latinos really don't last that much and that they are stuck in mid-manager levels. We're not increasing at the level of what we're being educated and we're growing. We don't have the representation that we should be having. And there are issues in the companies and there are issues in Latinos too, right? So we both need to grow. But it was a big piece for me. Like, I can't just give you names because I can give you names and then in 3 months they're gonna be gone. What are you actually doing to keep them? To understand what they need. We have different leadership styles. Leadership is very US corporate centric. So if you don't fit that mold, or not leadership material. Right? No, we just do it differently. We're as leaders as you are. We're as smart as you are. But when you're measuring us with the only one
And we
measuring,
don't ask for pay raises. I know
we don't
that's
negotiate
right,
at
we
all
don't. And
because we don't like conflict.
Not only that, I have clients who tell me, I worked there for 3 years. I worked so hard. I'm always coming Saturday and Sunday. Whenever my boss called me, 12 o'clock at night, and answer. But they never, I said, did you ask? They said, no.
Nope.
Why should I ask? They should know better. I say, why should you pay?
Yep.
They pay you. That's why I feel so sorry. I always tell them, if you don't mind, I don't mind. I know most of these bosses. I represent them in my job, on my H-1Bs and stuff. I don't mind calling your boss, but you need to. So I have to write them down. This is how. You don't ask by, you just be nice and say, and
But
don't
we're not
bring
taught
your
to do
family.
that.
Yeah,
That's
right,
culturally
that's
doesn't.
right, that's right.
It's not.
Or they'll say, but my wife wants me to ask. Don't say your wife. Don't say I have 3 children and need to go to private school. You deserve a raise.
Yep.
And I just need more money.
Yep.
If not, I already have a counter offer. And worse is they like the company so much, they decline another offer. They don't tell the boss they have an offer and there's more money. I'm like, what are you thinking? You say, oh, I really like my job. I say, hello.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm glad you raised that, because sometimes I think, am I that mean or something,
No, and I think it goes back to culture.
That's right.
I don't think we realize how important some of our backgrounds are, the ways that we were raised, the way that, historically
And we
impacted
earn the
our...
money.
And
And
when
you
we
don't
come
have
to the
beg
US,
for your money.
when we
Right.
come to the US, we're like, okay, well, now I have to speak about my accomplishments.
Right,
well,
right.
I don't know how to do that.
That's right.
Or ask
Do
for
I
more
even
money.
have a company? I do the same thing in my
yeah.
office. I'll tell my staff or my people, I say, I'm so lost. And the American people look at me like, how could you be lost? You're the boss. But my foreign-born people say, I understand, but take it relax. Maybe take 3 hours off, go swimming. That's okay, right? But it's just a different culture, but we got it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, I'm so glad I talked to you. Yeah, so nice. Yeah. Oh, Chinese have the same problem.
Yeah, we
no
have many
problem.
similarities culturally speaking, I've
And let me
noticed.
ask you this: for example, 50% of this business have Latino speakers.
Spanish speakers, you mean?
Yeah,
Or, okay.
Hispanics and Latino and Brazilian, whatever. Do they have a caste? Like in the Asian community, we have a caste. Like they respect age. So the fact that I'm older, I don't even have to say anything to look at me and get me my tea because I'm older. We respect age. We respect college and university.
Yep.
We respect people who speak Mandarin more than Hong Kong language. We just know we respect more mainland Chinese versus maybe Singaporeans. But we sort of know, like we
Yep.
have that outcast. In your community, do you have that?
So yes and no, and I will say yes, we do. So the concept of respect as a cultural value is different from the way that the U.S. looks at it. So respect is given automatically to people in certain positions of power, right, or perceived positions
Same
of
with
power.
our
So
people, yeah.
highly educated, older. People in clergy, priests, doctors, teachers, in general, that's given automatic deference to people seen in positions of power. In the US in general, people feel like they have to earn your respect, right? In Spanish, we have two words. We have the formal you and the informal you. And you really need to know when to use which one, right? So, because that's another kind of signal of respect. You're treating me as an informal you. Who do you think you are, right? You have to treat me in the formal you. So that's kind of like another marker. However, I have to say, past 20 years perhaps since I left Chile, I feel like because of globalization, because of, more empowering the younger generations, that is changing a little bit. In the US, that also changes when you start having generations that have been in the US for longer, right? So you become more acculturated to the culture of the US. So when you have a Latina third or fourth generation, they are more Americans than Latinos from Latin America, right? So that sometimes changes because they are kind of mixing both, right? This bicultural kind of 200%er that they call it now. It's like 100% Latino, 100% American. They have to kind of combine those two cultures, and they are questioning a lot of that. But perhaps if you go back to older generations or people born and raised in Latin America, they would have those markers of like respect and social class. We were talking about this earlier, that we're seen as like, well, everybody from Chile is going to be friends. Well, no, you wouldn't be friends with everybody in Chile. We're highly classist too, right?
Like, same with Chinese.
Where did you
It's
go
like,
to
oh my
school,
gosh,
or
right.
where do you live, or like what city even? Like if you're not from Santiago, you're like a nobody. Like it's just, so there are other markers that, of course, when you bring those into the US, they continue existing, right? So it's not like everything disappear and we're all friends here. And that's a big challenge in the Hispanic community or Latino community. We're a mix of so many different people and countries and stories and socioeconomics and colors that, it's hard to just say that we're all kind of the same. And I think some people like to reduce us to that. And then they notice, right, in the elections, well, we're not all the same. We all not even vote the same because we're very, very complex and very multi-layered.
And how does the reduction of DEI affect you? Aside from, of course, the business and stuff, how do you feel about that? Maybe it's too political, but I just want to see, because I have certain feelings that I cannot talk about even with my clients, because we all have different feelings, you know?
Yeah. You know, it has been a journey, I would say, personally speaking. So from the business perspective, I'm gonna say, obviously, you know, some clients are big nonprofits and big government agencies, federal agencies. So I have had to, you know, take a hit and see, because they are pausing some of their, you know, spending, some of the, usually in a company is their employee resource groups, the Latino employee resource groups, which are affinity groups. They are pausing their budgets, right? And that's impacting me. But we're going to be okay. I think at the core, what has been hard for me has been truly realize that there is an attempt to really almost like delete us as individuals, right? And look at us as not being fully human. I think that for me has been hard as a person, right? When there is so much bad narrative around immigrants, about and everybody says that, oh, it's immigrants from everywhere. Well, yes and no, because there's definitely a target in immigrants from Latin America. That's just whether people agree or not, or perhaps it's my perception, but I strongly believe that there is certain immigrants are better than others, and we are not in the better ones, right? So when you feel attacked when the administration really is kind of making you disappear as an individual, I think that is at the core what has been very hurting to me. It's overwhelming too, right? Because there are so many things happening that I took the advice of my son and my husband, and they said, you know, control what you can control. So I try to be very mindful too of how much news, how much am I listening to, how much, you know, I'm filling my cup with, you know, with the community and the things that fill me up and make me feel good. What are the things that I am doing, right, to feel more hopeful, versus really letting these other things impact me. I don't want them to win.
Right.
I wholeheartedly believe that I agree that there has to be rules for immigration, but at the same time, without looking at the causes of immigration, the root causes, we're not going to solve the problem. So, and even if all of that was not true, there is a sense of humanity that I think we're losing. That I don't want to become that person. So I'm just, you know, fighting in a way that I don't want to forget that, yes, I was lucky because I came with a scholarship, and I met my husband, and I came here and I was able to become a citizen. But that doesn't give me any right to judge and to treat other immigrants that didn't have the luck that I had and the opportunities and the privilege, to treat them as less human or as criminals just for the fact that they wanted to come to the U.S. for a better life.
And to your comment of Latino Hispanics being mistreated, and you're too young to remember, there was a time Chinese were being mistreated. I still remember, yes, the Chinese people, because a lot of us in Chinatown, we have criminal records. I mean, it's just because it is what it is. So, and we have deportation orders. We got, especially Vietnamese community, we all have problems. And then later on, they started another community. So the latest in the past, maybe 10, 15 years, are the Latinos. But before them was more the Chinese, but before them is more the Vietnamese, and then before them is more the Indians. That's why when I represent my Indian community, a lot of them that came in the 90s and maybe about 2000, 2005, they still have their order of deportation. And once in a while, they may have a DUI. Now I'm in trouble because immigration is specifically saying, or the new administration, the Trump administration is saying, people with criminal record go to jail. People with deportation go to jail. And a lot of my clients had it in the 90s and the 80s, you know, so those people even got green cards. Now is scared because they already got the green card. So I think all communities are being in the same, but you're right. And actually, I think one of the congressmen, it could be Marcia Fudge, were telling me, why are the Latinos getting the thrust of this? And it's not fair because people interview Latino leaders, but the Chinese, we get away with it because people think we're model Chinese. Oh, no, we don't get away with it. That's another argument. And the Latinos getting worse treatment on the Chinese. Of course, I think the Chinese got worse treatment, but I'm Chinese. Or the Indians, right? But it's just a comment to your comment. Yeah, but it is, you're right, now it's a lot of Latinos, but I think the Arabic people will be suffering too. Because with that travel list now,
Yep.
they're talking about the Arabic, the Trump 1 list, but the Trump 2 now is adding non-Arabic people in that list. So it is coming. So we'll have to talk more about
Yep.
that.
Yep, definitely.
Again, my name is Margaret Wong, and I'm so excited about this. If I got time, I may have run over the time, but Miss Marcia is so exciting. I've heard of her for years, and our producer here, Mr. Matt, it's really the one who said, I will try to get her to come to your interview. I say, thank you. Because I was always too embarrassed to call her because she's a busy woman, she has family, she has a job, she owns her own business. And she's very, very smart, I want to tell you. So please follow her. Please join us to our future conversations. And thank you, Ms. Marcia.
Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Yeah.